This video is made possible by Square Enix, who gave me this copy of Oninaki for free and gave me this opportunity, of which I'm very grateful. Oninaki by RPG Factory and published by Square Enix then is truly a phenomenon that at first I didn't think I would be that into. My experience with titles such as Square Enix's own Secret of Mana, which is a similar slashy style game, which to this day remains my favourite role-playing game, has given me a sense of expectation that usually doesn't get fulfilled by modern top-down action combat RPGs, if we want to call them that for lack of a better term. There's always something missing somewhere and I can never quite put my finger on it. Sometimes it might be a lack of charm, or artistically the visuals might not be quite there for my own personal needs, but I was pleasantly surprised when I booted up Oninaki for the first time. The only thing I'd seen from this game previously was the incredibly flashy trailer full of spoilers they put together and unveiled back at E3 2019, and I didn't really have a lot to say about it then. But now I've played it and put some decent time into it so far, I have to say it's grown on me quite a bit. Firstly, let's cover the bits I love about this game so far, and that has to be the combat specifically. The game gives you an understanding of these demons early on. These are a special type of the Lost, which are explained to basically be spirits that cannot be banished, destroyed, or otherwise are in a state of limbo until they essentially pass on by completing something they didn't in their life previous. Only some of these have such a great resolve that they remain and turn into demons, of which you can meet and collect and basically empower you with new skills and the ability to use different weapons throughout the progression of your game. You start out then with one demon, which is explained through the backstory and certain flashbacks, but this actually allows you to wield its powers. In the case of the first one, Aisha, you can wield her sword, which allows for slashes and dashes specifically. Her initial ability that charges up is called Gale Slash, which actually lunges you in a direction you face and slashes forwards, which is both incredibly useful and can be quite dangerous if you use it towards an enemy when they're about to use an attack, as you actually get locked for a few seconds in that animation. This can be circumnavigated through the skill tree, which I'll get to later, but it starts out quite clunky and obviously looks a little clunky on this footage. The game explains shortly after through the prologue that there's a meter that builds up with every attack and ability, of which, if it reaches 100%, you can tap a button and go into a new mode. This is a time-limited burst of power that lets you rip through enemies, and it's very satisfying to witness, increasing the speed at which you attack and the animations themselves, making for a burst of button presses give you the thirst for more carnage. It's very cathartic and makes you want to get as much damage in before it fades, and when it does fade, you just want to do it all over again. A little ways into the game, you get your second demon named Zarv. Zarv wields a lance, allowing you to actually jump in the air, which is something you couldn't do previous, and also use the Meteor ability, which allows you to basically dragoon jump into the sky and then slam the lance into whatever you aim at. And also, if you do a normal jump and then press the attack button, you're able to do an aerial lunge attack towards the ground target, which adds an entire different dynamic to fighting regular monsters and indeed bosses. And of course you can switch between these two demons, or however many demons you have, for maximum at any one time during combat. There are even skill tree perks to allow you to switch to them quicker, and eventually you can actually switch between them instantly, allowing you to combo the demons' mechanics together, which is just insane. Which, if you think about it, has a lot of possibilities. You can see from this first boss of the game then, I'm not really going to spoil much past this boss, you need to avoid ground-based AoEs as it smashes this mighty hammer into the ground. And whilst this new demon I got, Zarv, gives you the ability to jump past these, you could also do it with Aisha if you prefer, dashing away from the projectiles, jumping in, stabbing, and then dashing out. And this is the nature of the game's combat. There are upgrade paths for these demons, like I say, allowing you to refine their abilities using items found after defeating monsters throughout your gameplay to enhance their abilities and even gain new abilities to equip over time. You can even equip them with new weapons, so there's a loot-based system to this as well, but it's all very much based around these collectible demons and then switching between them on the fly as you wish or need. Interestingly enough though, the range of weapons has its own upgrade path as well. There's essentially an alchemy station you eventually unlock where you can meld these together. It's quite in-depth and quite fun. This game does have a casual mode for those of you who don't want a challenge and just want to see the storyline, and there's even a maniac difficulty setting that, believe me, will put hairs on your hairs, let alone on your chest. The difficulty differences don't really affect the storyline, but apparently the highest difficulty gives you higher item drop rates, which is really the only real benefit, other than it being obviously more challenging if that's what your heart desires, and you obviously get the same storyline throughout whichever difficulty you complete. I found myself dying a fair amount at the start of the game, but once you actually get used to the animation of each attack you wield and the gaps you have to survive in between, you can time things better and coordinate your attacks based on the monster's tells. Every monster sort of has an attack pattern, and it's up to you to learn them. Past the combat being completely brilliant in my opinion, and pretty much me talking about it for the last few minutes has been a testament to that, the storyline itself is quite a dark tale filled with twists and turns that honestly will shock you when you find out more about this world, and especially when you discover more about the Lost in particular, which are the limbo-based spirits. The storytelling of FFXIV is like a sharp-edged blade. It doesn't really matter how many titles these guys seem to make, they never really lose their capability to slice through your feels, and it makes me very happy to say that, as storyline for me is very important in a game. It may be not the main focus of this one, with the combat completely taking the lead in that, but it is fantastic nonetheless. The musical score for the game is beautiful, mixing folk themes and orchestral hits and trance themes and heavy metal. I think the boss music so far is just my favourite. It reminds me of a cross between Fairy Tale and Ruby, and it really suits the fast-flowing nature of the combat. And when you get used to it and start feeling that meter and letting loose your inner demon, it really goes well with the pace. You lose yourself in the artistry of it all, and before you know it, the boss is dead and that theme's ended and you just want to go again, which is why the higher difficulty mode is there. RPG-wise, the towns and places you visit do have the usual RPG fare within them. There's even a world map with places you can go and visit and revisit later on, market areas in the main town with NPCs to talk to and find out more about the world as a whole. There are even sometimes some side quests that come in the form of the Lost, which are the spirits that you as a watcher are supposed to help find and help pass on to the afterlife, which if you use the left trigger you can shift the veil and talk to them. Many just have a dying wish or a reason they cannot pass on in death to the afterlife, and you have to help them if you can, and obviously this is a choice, you don't have to do this, so obviously you want to do this if you want to do all the side quest things. If you're not interested in that, then you can just continue with your main storyline. And obviously if you do choose not to help them, then you risk missing out on precious rewards, and indeed there are some weapon upgrades that can only be obtained through this manner. The push of left trigger, as I mentioned, is a major mechanic we've not talked about previously, which is to cross the veil. This can be used anywhere in the game. So in combat areas on maps, it even reveals new enemies and new areas that can only be accessed or found with exploration in both of these worlds, the world of the living and that of the dead. It's a great idea, and it's definitely worth just tapping left trigger to see what's there. Half of the time I found treasure chests that didn't exist in the living world, and extra monsters to defeat for precious experience and items. I found myself going backwards and forwards around each map, tapping the left trigger on and off just to kill everything there. It was worth it for the experience and indeed for the loot. As time has gone by with the time I've had with Oninaki for the past few days, it's fair to say that the storyline in particular got rapidly more involved, with anime-style betrayals and over-the-top boss fights that spiral out of control that genuinely challenged me on normal mode difficulty, which I was pleasantly surprised by. The more I actually play Oninaki, the more I complain about my wireless PlayStation controller for running out of charge and halting my play, because whilst the keyboard layout isn't bad, it's honestly a game I love to kick back in a comfy chair and relax to, whilst lining up as many monsters on screen as possible so that I can unleash my biggest AoE attacks. The type of demons you gain as the story progresses and the side content that you can do opens up a wonderful variety of customizable ways to approach content. For one example, one of the demons is a wolf-like creature, supposedly in his backstory a former human, and his memories are genuinely interesting to save up fragments from defeating enemies to actually learn more about him. There are, at the time of my progress of this video, 6 demons unlocked throughout various places I've explored or have been given to me directly in the storyline, and some of them obviously, like I say, I've had to actually shift the veil and find myself, and these are all awesome so far, from smashing the environment in slow hunking slams with a battle axe, to quickly slicing through hordes of enemies with a scythe, or dashing and piercing the enemies with Aisha's blade, thrusting a giant lance and dragoon jumping from the air, or just plain shooting from ranged and kiting monsters around with 2 guns as you build up your move meters to unleash a cool looking attack. To me, this is right up my avenue, my alley if you will, probably my street, and most likely my postcode type of a game. It fills me with joy to know that they're able to make games like this still today, and so successfully, and combine all of the parts of a hack and slash and that sort of compelling combat with a rich storyline and a wonderful world that I actually care about. Every time I slay enough to fill the meter to 100%, I then try to fill it to 200% when I realised I could do that. Every percent after 100, you get a massive damage increase against you from any hit that you take, but also you're getting an exponential damage increase, so it's kind of like that's the trade-off, and usually that makes you a better player because you're avoiding more, you're doing more damage, you just want to get that meter filled and unleash on everything you see. And usually when I do fill the meter to 200% on a map, it's usually boss time, which is all kinds of fun, unleashing that huge meter to give me fast, devastating abilities, crushing my way through the opposition like butter, giving them no chance at all. There's a lot that can be said then for its sheer cathartic slasher nature, but ultimately where does this all fall in balance? Oninaki takes pride in its rich storyline covering everything to do with a world reliant on rebirth, reincarnation as themes, and choices that you make in life that lead up to your inevitable end. Sometimes it can really get you if you let it emotionally. There have been a couple of scenes like that, but there are also some occasions where I've seen that some of the dialogue comes across a little bit disjointed and feels a little bit off, and actually made me question why what was said in a scene was actually written there. I can't spoil specifics for this because this is later in the game, but during a harrowing death scene of a certain character that you get attached to later on in the storyline, the initial death of that character feels very underwhelming, and there's a lack of immediate emotion from any characters supporting or otherwise, with only a few small cutscenes showing life move on as if nothing happened regardless of the importance of that character in question. It's only after where you go on another quest in the game and suddenly you find that person's soul do you actually get any closure, and then you eventually get that cutscene that you expected 5 minutes previously, which actually makes you tear up as you naturally would. It seems then that pacing is probably my only major criticism with parts of the storyline, but for the most part they get to where they need to be story-wise quite quickly. It just sometimes feels like they take a step in a completely different direction that you didn't expect before getting to the same scene that you did expect originally. But don't get it twisted, that's not to say that it's overtly predictable per se, but there are some very anime style scenes that you not only expect but you actually badly want as well. So when they do happen on screen you feel accomplished and stand back in awe, but you knew they were coming. So if I was to summarise my playtime with this game so far, I would say that this game is really for people who like their anime tropes in storyline, the beautiful, winding, iconic music famous by Square Enix and the many talented studios within, but most certainly above anything else it has to be said that the main attraction is the combat. If you love your fast-paced hack-and-slash combat with potential combos, switching between demon attacks on the fly and pressing lots of button combinations, then you could make this game look absolutely incredible. If you do, however, like me, have very little skill when it comes to comboing things together and that sort of thing, but you actually love to get that feeling of burning through a horde of monsters for experience and loot, then this game really is for us as well. I had an incredible time with Oninaki, and I do plan to finish this off screen. It's genuinely a great game and a welcome addition to the RPG Factory library that we have, and if you can get this on the Switch, whilst I cannot attest to how good that version is as I played on the Steam PC release here, I can imagine it would be a perfect game for that system. But there we go. Thank you once again to Square Enix for letting me have this code for free. It's been fantastic, and what some people might say, well, he got it for free, how can we trust his word? Believe me when I say I don't recommend things lightly, and I do honestly feel that this game in particular is worth playing, especially if anything I talked about previously resonates with you in just a slight way. It's worth checking out. Either way, thank you all kindly for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time.